During the late 18th century to the early 19th century, a new time period for Britain began. This period is known as the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution caused an immense transformation that completely changed the world. For one, this transformation changed the rights and laws of the people. The people achieved new possibilities and opportunities, especially the women. The role of women changed in a big way during the Industrial Revolution. At the time of the Industrial Revolution, women had few rights. In fact, the laws concerning women were almost non-existent. The women were still inferior to men and had no right to education. However, a law was created in which the women were allowed to work. This law changed their lives in a big way because it granted the women more independence. Being able to work, the women received pay or wages that allowed them to be in control of their possessions. Now they are somewhat able to survive on their own, without the need of a husband to provide them with money. Even though the majority of women worked, there was a percentage of women that didn't. These women would be high class or perhaps part of nobility or royalty. They did not have to work for money because they already had money given to them. This working law was a major change. However, women were still looked down upon and had harsh working conditions. Most of the women worked for the same amount of hours as men, about 12 to 15 hours a day, in factories, mines, and mills. At the mines, the women were mostly required to haul tubs of coal through small passageways and tunnels, or lift the coal and the workers out of the underground. On top of all that work, the women had to wear chains between their legs. At the factories and mills, the women were mostly required to do dainty, precise work. Most of the women were abused or mistreated at work. Some of them were even victims of rape due to indecent clothing. You would think that after all this hard and sometimes dangerous work, that the women were paid a proper wage. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The women earned about half of what the men would earn. For example, at the Kotal mill, the men earned from 4 to 32 shillings a week, whereas the women earned about 12 to 11 shillings a week. From their low salary, they could hardly pay for food. However, the percentage of wealthy women were much more fortunate. They could be governesses for rich children, maids for wealthy families, or not have to work at all. They did not have to go through all the hard work that the lower class women had to. On top of all that, women were required to do household work and take care of the children. Women's living conditions during the Industrial Revolution was very deprived and their health was at high risk. Almost every ordinary woman had to work in very harsh conditions. At the coal mines, women worked in the same conditions as men, dressed like men, and were treated the same way as men. The men wore very little clothing if they were indeed wearing clothes. Their clothes were mainly consisted of pants that the women had to wear too. Since the women were half naked and the men were almost naked or naked, it was common that the women would experience sexual assaults while working. Because of the contaminated air and water around their workplaces, working made their health worse. Some pits were wet all the time, so people had to work for 12 hours in wet clothes, and of course, none of the people at that time had much time to clean themselves. Due to bad hygiene, symptoms of cholera would spread. Also, they had children and households to take care of. After working in dreadful conditions, they were still responsible for washing, cooking, and taking care of the children. Also, as the industrial age required speeding up birth rate, mothers were expected to have many children, typically more than 10. They were often needed to work straight after giving birth, leaving the newborn child to older relatives to take care of. During the Industrial Revolution, women had gone through significant changes in their lives. Due to the demanding society, they were forced to work and to make more money. Women and men worked in the same conditions, but women were paid significantly less than men. Moreover, their burden was doubled because, at the same time, they were responsible for their households. However, because the women who had lived in these conditions, women are not considered as inferior anymore, and they have now gained respect and more rights from society.